Welcome back to Voices of Government IT Zero Trust, sponsored by Unisys here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. My guest today is Matt Newfield, Chief Information Security Officer at Unisys, and I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. And Matt, before the break, we were talking about the active defense and early reconnaissance strategy. Just wind up some of the details on what that's all about and how to do it, and then I have some other tech questions after that.
Sure. So I think one of the problems that a lot of people are facing in this cyber world is that they have focused so heavily on peer prevention that they have not spent enough time really understanding what is it we're supposed to do if we get an infection, if we have a breach, how do we react to that? And there's a lot of tech that's in the market space today that we have been relying on to help notify us of a problem. But it's that next step that is really a major concern. There have been federal agencies that have released information about you have 4 days to do something. There was a very interesting article written earlier this year by another organization that said you have 20 minutes to do something if you get an infection or a breach before it's too late.
I think it was 20 minutes from China, an hour from Russia, and 3 hours from North Korea. Yeah.
And then you look at major studies that say the mean time to detect is, and depending on which article you read, between 160 and 190 days before people really know that they have a problem. And even with all that preventive technology, those things are still existing. So when we talk about active defense, what we're talking about is using machine learning and using some of the basics to really help kill that cyber kill chain in an environment, so that you get real time to investigate what's going on without whatever's in your environment spreading, without data leakage occurring. And that's really what we're talking about with active defense.
And in that sense, you also get a better handle on your continuity of operations, because
Absolutely.
That's the big fear of cyber people, is that something will be interrupted.
Well, we've been the office of no for way too many years, right? I mean, it's the running joke that when you call the CISO or you call the office of the CISO, generally the answer is you can't do that, right? We get tied with legal all the time that, there's too much risk and we're no, and that's actually not what we're talking about here. We've really become the office of yes, and here's how to do things safely. And that, I think, is the mind shift change. We were talking earlier about the human side of things. It's the ability to be able to tell people what the risk is and how they can still do business safely. And that is also tied into active defense. When we have situations where something may be compromised, where an asset or a credential has an issue, how we can deal with that without truly impacting the business on a larger scale.
So it sounds like, just to zoom out a little bit for a moment, that to have zero trust, you really have to have an architectural way of thinking.
Absolutely.
As opposed to a technology stack way of thinking.
Absolutely.
So is it a mindset and an architecture?
It's a pure mindset. The core of this is about having a mindset change. You really want to look at your environment differently. It's putting on a business lens when you think about the organization instead of just a pure technology lens. Who needs to do what to be able to run your business? Who should be accessing certain things in the environment so that the business can operate correctly? Even in concepts such as microsegmentation, taking that to the real next level to say, you and I are part of a microsegment, you and I are able to have a conversation because we're part of that. Should you have the ability to initiate that conversation with me, or should I have the ability to initiate that conversation with you? That's not a tech conversation, that's a business conversation, and you can do that throughout your environment.
It strikes me that where often people talk about applying business technology and logic to business processes, this is almost applying a cybersecurity architecture to the real life transactions that take place and interactions among organizations within the larger group.
So the problem, I think, in cyber, to your point, is we have taken it from a pure tech perspective. A lot of us grew up in technology, firewall administration, or we were network administration, but without a lot of business background. And I think what you're seeing in the market space is it's really about the business, right? I tell my staff all the time, the reason I'm so focused on the business side of things is without the business, we don't have the budget to secure the business. So that's where we need to start. And for me, this new mindset really does focus around enabling and growing that business for cybersecurity.
And that ties into the idea that that boards of directors, and in the case of the public sector, secretaries, assistant secretaries, have the responsibility for cybersecurity because they pose existential threats to organizations. So the zero trust mindset then allows the security operation to talk in a business sense and maybe justify the investments needed to get there.
It's so true. And when we're having these conversations, whether it's a board of director, whether it's an agency head, whether it's Congress, when you're talking to them, you have to translate all of these risks into something that they understand, not vice versa. It has to be translated into the business at hand. It has to be put into a business context. And I find it very interesting over the past few years. I've done a lot of research with board of directors and with federal executives on why cybersecurity fails them so much. And the number one thing I hear is they don't know what their cyber professionals are talking about, right? Mm-hmm. They don't understand how the number of hits on a firewall translates into business process. They don't understand actually why that matters. We have a tendency in my world to focus solely on providing statistics, FUD statistics, that fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And isn't it great to tell you that, when we got attacked 10,000 times yesterday to try to get more budget, and that does not lead to a zero trust mindset, and it also does not lead to better protection for an organization. The flip to it, and I told our board this when we were talking, is, I showed up today, I showed up here today. Do you care how many accidents I avoided? And the answer is no, right? How many times did I hit the brakes? How many red lights did I not run? Doesn't matter. What matters is I'm here today. There were no accidents. The controls we put in place, either via training, via brakes and technology, worked well enough to get me here safely. That translates directly into business.
And when you get early reconnaissance, and you also have all these defenses prior to that, you've got a lot of data being generated by the networks. And
Absolutely.
Getting a little technical here, the mantra we hear so much today is that you need artificial intelligence or machine learning in some way to just make sense of all this massive data. So for zero trust, you do need that technology insertion, I would think.
Absolutely. But a lot of times where organizations and agencies are failing is not at that extreme level. Once you get past the basics, then absolutely you do. But if you look, again, at a lot of the attacks that are happening at an agency level and a corporation level and from nation states, a lot of them are very basic. Mm-hmm. And a good one that recently came out of the DIB is talking about Microsoft Patch Tuesday. And it's Microsoft Patch Tuesday and Hack Friday, because what people have figured out is if they take the patches that Microsoft is releasing and they reverse engineer them, they can figure out what flaws in the operating system they're fixing and quickly write code to exploit those flaws, knowing that agencies and corporations are not patching their machines within 3 days. Most of them aren't patching within 30 days, 60 days, or even 90 days. A lot of them have very difficult times patching those exposed pieces of infrastructure. So they're able to exploit things based off the patches that are supposed to protect them.
So you should never be in the set and forget mode when it comes to cyber.
You're never in the set and forget mode. And you've always got to be thinking one step ahead and putting in other controls. And again, if you can start adding active defense controls to your environment, maybe you don't stop that exploit from running on your asset that may have only been compromisable in the last 48 hours or 72 hours because a patch was released. But what you can do, again, is help your organization quickly recover and make that a non-newsworthy event. Maybe you lose a single machine. Maybe you lose just a couple of machines, but you don't lose an environment. You don't take an entire web infrastructure down.
All right, on that note, we'll take a short break. My guest today is Matt Newfield, Chief Information Security Officer at Unisys. And I'm your moderator, Tom Temin. This is Voices of Government IT, Zero Trust, sponsored by Unisys, here on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.